Welcome back. This will be the third episode in the 3D Studio Max tutorial series. In this episode, we're going to continue talking about some of the tools that we use to manipulate objects within 3D Studio Max. So, first things first, let's select an object. Um, well, let's let's just select an object for now. So we just left click the object. Now we can go up here and use some of these different tools to select it or to adjust it. So we can hit select and move up here to uh, move the object. So as you can see, these little arrows pop up, and these basically show how you're going to move the object in relation to the x, y, and z coordinates. So if we hold z, it moves up, x, it moves, in this case, farther away from us. That was y, and x, it would move to the right. And obviously this would change depending on your orientation. And you can also, later on, you might change the, we can add a relative axis to objects, so it'll move in relation to that axis instead of the universal one that we have. But that's later on. For now, we just have this. Now, if you notice, if I click in between, in this case the x and the y, they'll both be highlighted as well as that little square. So that means I can move it in basically anywhere I want, but it won't move in the z direction. Same thing here. I can do x and y, or z and y, and it'll move that in those two axes, but not in the x-axis. Then in the center, I can hit that little square, and everything will move in all axes, no matter what. So pretty useful to remember. And this whoopsies. Also, just if you want to quickly select this tool, you can just go ahead and hit an object. Q will unselect any sort of modification tool that you're using, or movement tool. Press W, it will let you get the select and move. So next we move on to the select and rotate, which you can access by hitting E on an object, and this will, as the name implies, help allow you to rotate the object. So again, this little ring matrix thing will appear, and you can go ahead and click each one to change the orientation or rotate it around the specific axis. So we hover over the blue line here. It looks yellow, but it's just because it's selected, but it's blue. And you notice the z-axis lights up in the little middle bit. If we can rotate around the z-axis, so if you imagine there was the axis going through the middle of the square. Same thing with the rest of these. Not too complicated. Oopsies. And you can do a similar thing where if you click specific areas, you can rotate specific, or you can rotate in specific. Actually, no. I'm sorry. You can't rotate to. There's not as many options to rotate. You can't rotate in two directions at once. You can do all directions, or one specific axis, but not two. This is kind of like that. It's just rotating it around the point, like in a circle, as you can see. But anyway, so it's kind of oriented that. By the way, when you have a specific tool equipped, down here, there'll be these different settings that you can use to edit some things. So if I go back to the move tool, here I can hit these and it'll move them in different orientations. So if you know the coordinates of where you want an object, you can just fill it out right here, and it'll move it to where you want it to be. Same thing with here. So if I'm gonna click and drag the arrow. It's okay if you want to go off screen with the arrow, with the little drag bar, but just be careful, because sometimes it's a little wonky like there. But anyway, you can use that as well if you want more precise measurements. Maybe you just want to move 90 degrees. You can also hold Shift. Oop, whoopsies, my apologies, wrong one. That's not it. Never mind. I guess I was thinking of something else. Anyway, moving on to the next tool. If you hit R, or you click up here, you can get the scale tool. Now, this is very useful if for, as the name implies, scaling things. Hold on one second. Oop. One second. Okay, my apologies. I had the this little lock thing selected, which basically locked the what I could select. My apologies. So anyway, with the scale tool, similar to the other tools, you can scale in specific ways. So this will scale in the z-axis, the y-axis, and the x-axis, and then once again you can select specific area or specific combinations to scale in those directions, as well as all of them at once. So very useful if you want to sort of just adjust things in a way, or maybe modify things or make modify things and turn some shapes into other into more stylistic versions. Oopsies. Yeah. So that's what that is. There's also so where is it? Is it this one? That perhaps not. One second. Okay, sorry about that. I had to double check something. So right now we have it set to uniform scale. So things will scale in logical ways, more or less. If we click and hold here, and then we can go down here, we can have it scale in ununiform ways. So it's not too much different with this, I believe. You can kind of see it a bit more here-ish from different angles. But notice how it's not quite the same. The real different one is this one, which is select and squash. So what this will do is it'll scale in the direction you want, but it'll also affect the other ones. It'll basically retain the proportions in a way. I believe that's how it works. But this can be useful when you're trying to make some things look, squashed and more cartoony. But just be careful not to get a little hectic with it, or else you get some large objects like this. So I would just go back to this, and if you scale the entire thing down, then we do something like this, it becomes a bit more cartoony with how it looks in its proportions. Anyway, so yes. So those are the main ways you're going to be changing and manipulating objects, at least their placement and size and stuff. There's a few other options here, which like snap toggles and stuff like that, mirroring, having things be aligned. A lot of these are pretty self-explanatory. We have these little toggles here, which basically toggle other aspects of the UI. So toggle the ribbon will toggle over here. This is called the ribbon. I don't know if I mentioned that in the last episode. Toggle layer explorer will just turn this off and on, etc. Material editor. I believe I said this in the first video, but 3D Studio Max is very well known for its materials and making textures. Oh, I accidentally closed it. Here we go. There's a lot of stuff here. It's it can. I know when I first saw this, I thought it was particularly. I couldn't quite wrap my head around it, but it's not as difficult as it seems. This can be intimidating, especially when you start adding other objects to it. But it's really not too bad. We'll be going over that later. We also have the render setup and the rendering options, which again we'll be going over later. But for now, that's basically a lot of the manipulation tools we have, the basic ones at least. So that'd be the end of this episode. Next episode, we're gonna be talking about this side over here, what all these different things mean, all this jazz. This is where a lot of the meat and potatoes of everything is. Well, mostly here. This is when you're making models. But again, we'll go over that later. So for now, goodbye, and see you next time.